Please subscribe and share for more story. Marcus Hale's hand struck Estelle Rowland across the face for the offense of touching her own sideboard. A second later, his wife, Clarice, drove the sharp heel of her shoe into Estelle's calf. All of it, every ounce of cruelty, was for $6.8 million. Clarice leaned close, her breath sharp with expensive perfume. "This isn't your house anymore," she said coldly. "You touch what I allow you to touch." Estelle did not scream. She did not plead. She lowered herself slowly onto the bench beside the carved walnut sideboard, the same one she had commissioned in 1989, using the first real profits from the upholstery company she built after her husband fell ill. The wood had once glowed warmly, carved with ocean reeds along the edges. Today, it sat under a chandelier she never chose, in a house she no longer legally owned. Still, Estelle reached out and touched it. Her fingers traced the carvings like Braille, reading a past Clarice was determined to erase. The sideboard had been made from Brazilian walnut, finished by a master craftsman in Nova Scotia who signed his initials beneath the final drawer. For more than 30 years, no one placed so much as a letter on it without Estelle's permission. It had held wedding invitations, baptism gowns, and Marcus's first college rejection letter, tear-stained and crumpled. Now, the surface was sealed under a glossy coat that erased every nick and scratch. Clarice had sanded away history with precision. The small dent from Estelle's wedding ring, made when she leaned against it after Harold's final seizure, was gone. Clarice stepped closer. Her perfume was floral and sharp, worn like armor. "You heard me," she said. Estelle said nothing. The slap came fast, bright, and stunning. Her glasses slid crooked. Before she could adjust them, Clarice kicked her leg again, controlled, deliberate. Not to break bone. Only pride. Estelle allowed herself to fall. Not from pain but from choice. She landed on the thick designer rug Clarice had imported from Italy, the fibers releasing a cloud of artificial lavender. Clarice stood over her, breathing hard, as though she had won something. Then Estelle saw Marcus. He stood in the doorway, swirling amber liquor in a crystal glass. He did not move. He did not shout. He simply watched. $6.8 million, he said calmly. "You should have been buried before you ever touched it." That was the moment clarity arrived. He had known. He had allowed this. Maybe he had planned it. Estelle stayed quiet. Instead, she tilted her chin slightly toward the small silver hummingbird pinned to her shawl. Inside its delicate wings was a hidden lens. It had been recording since she entered the house. 8 minutes. Every word. Every strike. Every number that reduced her life to profit. She pushed herself upright. Clarice stepped back, startled by the absence of tears. Estelle smoothed her shawl and glanced at the staircase wall, where an old family portrait still hung. The photograph showed 5 people frozen in a decade-old smile: Estelle, Marcus, Clarice, young Theo, and Harold, still alive then. It had been taken during a Thanksgiving Clarice insisted be presentation ready. She had made Estelle remove her apron. "It looks working class," she said sweetly. Clarice wore ivory cashmere. Estelle wore navy blue. That was the last meal Clarice ever ate that Estelle cooked. The photo was hung higher now. Clarice's head slightly elevated above Estelle's, subtle dominance. "Get away from that sideboard," Clarice snapped. Estelle simply looked at her. Clarice's eyes were already rehearsing a story, how Estelle was confused, unstable, dramatic. Estelle picked up her handbag slowly. Marcus turned his back, dismissing her. Estelle pulled out her phone and pressed one button. "Emergency services," the voice answered. "My daughter-in-law just assaulted me," Estelle said evenly. "I need this call logged." She ended it. Silence swallowed the room. Clarice stared, stunned. She had expected tears. Drama. A fight. Estelle had none left to give. She opened the front door. Autumn air rolled in, salted and cold. Across the lawn, Mrs. Denning, the widow next door, was trimming her roses. She waved. Estelle smiled back. Mrs. Denning had once said, "You carry yourself like a woman who's already survived the worst." Estelle entered her car. Her hands were steady. In the glove compartment waited a small encrypted drive. There was always a backup. Trust, she had learned, was currency, and hers had been spent years ago. In the mirror, her cheek bloomed red. Her eyes, once soft, were sharp and awake. "They think I am weak," she whispered. Then she smiled. "Let them." That evening, Estelle sat in the sunroom of her coastal apartment, the one she bought quietly in her own name. She sent the files to her lawyer with a single message, Clause 9, effective immediately. Betrayal, Estelle knew, was not sudden. It was wrought, slow, and patient. Years earlier, she had signed her first document she shouldn't have. Marcus was 21, desperate to launch Hale textile imports. Harold had just been diagnosed with early-onset neurological disease. The loan officer warned her, "If this fails, you lose the house." Estelle answered calmly, "If I don't do this, I lose my husband's dignity." She built the company from a single loom in the garage into a respected New England importer. She negotiated contracts while sitting in hospital corridors. She smiled at clients after nights spent cleaning and feeding a man who no longer knew her name. That business paid for Marcus's education, their mortgage, and Harold's care. Clarice arrived when Marcus was 26, ambitious, polished, and calculating. She praised Estelle publicly and ignored her privately. She never washed a dish, never changed a pillowcase. "She's overwhelmed," Marcus said once. "So was I," Estelle thought. Harold died in spring rain. Clarice wore white and called it symbolic. A year later, they asked to move in. "Just temporarily," Marcus promised. Estelle agreed. They were all she had left. The locks changed within months. Furniture disappeared. Her reading chair appeared online for sale. Then one day, her key didn't work. Clarice cracked the door. "Oh, Marcus forgot to tell you. We rekeyed for insurance." No new key was offered. Then came the email. "Please text before visiting." Estelle read it twice, then deleted it. Silence, she decided, was not surrender. It was observation. She began noticing everything. 3 months before the slap, she found a folder labeled Estate Realignment. Her name appeared beside the words former owner. She ordered a silver brooch that night. It recorded everything. Every insult. Every whisper. Every plan. She sent the files nightly to her lawyer, Samuel Gray, the only man who still called her Mrs. Rowland. After the assault, the evidence was undeniable. The video. The call log. The numbers. Clause 9 was activated. At the law office, Clarice arrived confident. "Once this is signed, things will be simpler," she said. Samuel placed a folder on the table. "This nullifies every transfer." The footage played. The slap echoed. Marcus went pale. "You set us up," he hissed. Estelle finally spoke. "You left me no other path." The stamp came down. Everything reverted. Clarice fled. Marcus followed. Estelle remained seated, calm. She had entered a ghost. She left restored. By evening, accounts were frozen. Titles reversed. The next morning, Clarice cried on social media. Then the video surfaced. Sponsors vanished. Marcus was suspended. Estelle met Theo later that week. He had kind eyes, his grandfather's. She transferred 30% of the company into a trust for him. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you never forgot I was human," she said. She sold the remaining properties and built something new, the Quiet Table Foundation, offering protection for elders being erased by family greed. At the opening, Estelle stood tall. "They thought my silence was weakness," she said. "But I was listening." She had lost a son, but she had reclaimed her voice. The backlash arrived faster than Estelle expected. By noon the next day, Clarice's carefully built image was cracking. Sponsors released short, sterile statements about misaligned values. Marcus's firm placed him on administrative leave, citing an ethics clause Estelle herself had drafted decades earlier. She watched none of it live. Instead, she sat in her apartment kitchen, slicing apples with slow precision. Control, she had learned, lived in small motions. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, but she let it rest face down on the counter. When it finally rang, she answered calmly. "Mrs. Rowland," the voice said, strained. "This is Marcus. We need to talk." Estelle leaned back in her chair. "There's nothing left to discuss," she replied. "You made your choices." "You destroyed us," he snapped. Estelle closed her eyes briefly. "No," she said softly. "You did. I simply stopped absorbing the damage." She ended the call and poured herself tea. For the first time in years, her hands did not shake. Samuel Gray called that afternoon. "Everything has been secured," he said. "Accounts, properties, intellectual rights, all restored." Estelle thanked him, then paused. "There's one more thing," she said. "I want to make sure they can't touch anyone else." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "I suspected you'd say that," he replied. They discussed injunctions, protections, and a public filing that would ensure transparency. When the call ended, Estelle walked to the window and watched gulls circle the shoreline. Her thoughts drifted backward, not to the slap, but to the years before it. To nights sitting beside Harold, reciting shipping numbers just to keep herself anchored. To Marcus as a boy, asleep at the table while she worked late. "Where did I lose you?" she whispered. There was no answer. Only the steady sound of waves, reminding her that grief, like water, reshaped everything it touched. Theo visited 2 days later. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, hands shoved into his pockets. "Grandma," he said gently. Estelle smiled. "Come in. Sit." They shared soup in quiet. Finally, he spoke. "They said you're unstable." Estelle laughed softly. "Of course they did." She slid a folder across the table. "This is yours," she said. Theo opened it, eyes widening. "I don't deserve this." Estelle reached across and squeezed his hand. "You deserve it because you never demanded it." She remembered the night of the incident, how Theo had slipped out with a cold cloth and water. No questions, no judgment, just presence. "Kindness," she told him, "is not loud, but it endures." Theo nodded, swallowing hard. "I won't waste this," he promised. Estelle believed him. The quiet table foundation launched quietly, without spectacle. Estelle insisted on that. "We don't need applause," she told the board. "We need doors opened." The foundation offered legal aid, temporary housing, and advocacy for elders facing coercion. During the first intake meeting, a woman clutched Estelle's hand and whispered, "They told me I was a burden." Estelle felt something steady settle in her chest. "You are not," she said firmly. "You never were." Word spread. Not through marketing, but through relief. Through people finally being heard. At the first public forum, Estelle stood at the podium and spoke plainly. "I am not brave," she said. "I was tired of disappearing." The room was silent, every face turned toward her. She spoke of silence, not as weakness, but as preparation. "Sometimes," she concluded, "listening is how we survive long enough to act." Clarice attempted one final maneuver. She filed a complaint alleging elder manipulation. Samuel dismissed it within hours. The evidence was airtight. Marcus sent one last message. "You didn't have to ruin us." Estelle typed a response, then deleted it. She chose peace instead. That evening, she returned to the old house, now legally hers again, for the first time alone. The chandelier was gone. The walls were repainted. Her sideboard stood restored, its surface warm and familiar. Estelle ran her fingers along the carved reeds. "I'm home," she whispered. There was grief in reclaiming space, but also power. She locked the door behind her, not out of fear, but choice. Months later, Estelle stood at a long oak table during a foundation dinner. Survivors laughed softly, sharing stories. Theo raised a glass. "To Grandma," he said, voice steady, "for reminding us that dignity is not inherited, it's protected." Estelle smiled, eyes bright. She had lost illusions, not herself. Her legacy was no longer measured in properties or profits, but in people who would never again be told they were disposable. As the evening wound down, Estelle pinned the silver hummingbird to her shawl one last time. It had served its purpose. She placed it gently in a drawer and closed it. Some witnesses she knew could finally rest. The house settled into a different kind of silence once Estelle reclaimed it. Not the tense, watchful quiet that had followed her for years, but something gentler. She woke early, opened windows, and let the sea air move freely through the rooms. Each morning she chose one small task: restoring a drawer, rehanging a photograph, polishing the sideboard. One thing at a time, she murmured to herself. When neighbors stopped by, they spoke carefully, as if unsure what version of her they would meet. Estelle offered them tea and spoke plainly. "I'm well," she told them. "Better than before." In the afternoons, she worked with Samuel on foundation matters. "We've received 12 new requests this week," he said during one call. Estelle nodded. "Then we answer all 12. She had no appetite for revenge anymore. Justice, she found, was far more satisfying when it was quiet and precise. Marcus tried once more to reach her. He appeared at the gate one evening, thinner than she remembered, anger replaced by something brittle. "I just want to understand," he said. Estelle did not invite him in. She stood with her hands folded, calm. "Understanding comes before harm," she replied. "You skipped that step," he scoffed. "She pushed me." Estelle's gaze sharpened. "You watched." The words landed heavily between them. For a moment, he looked like the boy who once needed her to fix everything. But that boy was gone. "Take care of yourself," she said. Finally, Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. He left without another word. Estelle locked the gate and felt no guilt. Boundaries, she had learned, were not punishments. They were protections. Work at the Quiet Table Foundation intensified. Stories poured in, quiet emails, trembling phone calls, handwritten letters. Estelle read everyone. She recognized patterns: pressure disguised as love, paperwork disguised as help, cruelty disguised as concern. At a training session, a young advocate asked, "How did you know when to stop staying silent?" Estelle considered the question. "When silence began to cost me my safety," she said. Before that, it was strategy. The room was still. She watched understanding ripple across their faces. Later, she stood alone in the office kitchen, rinsing a mug. Her reflection looked older, but steadier. "You're still here," she whispered. It felt like an achievement. Theo became a quiet presence in her life. He visited on Sundays, bringing bread or soup, never asking for anything. One afternoon, he asked, "Do you miss them?" Estelle didn't answer immediately. "I miss who I thought they were," she said at last. "Not who they chose to become." Theo nodded. "I won't choose that," he promised. She believed him. They sat together in companionable silence, watching the tide pull back from the shore. Estelle felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she hadn't realized she was still carrying. Clarice disappeared from public view. Her project stalled. Invitations stopped coming. Estelle did not follow the news. She had stopped measuring peace by other people's downfall. Instead, she focused on the foundation's first housing placement. When the keys were handed over to an elderly man who had been sleeping in his car, Estelle felt tears sting her eyes. "You built this," he told her. She shook her head gently. "I survived it," she corrected. The distinction mattered. One evening, alone in the restored dining room, Estelle set the table for one. She placed her grandmother's linen, poured a glass of water, and sat. The sideboard gleamed nearby, whole again. Estelle closed her eyes and breathed. She had lost years, trust, and a son. But she had gained clarity. Dignity, once reclaimed, did not need defending. It simply stood. And Estelle Rowland, at last, stood with it. Spring arrived quietly, without announcement. Estelle noticed it in the way light lingered longer on the water and how the air softened in the mornings. She reopened the back study and converted it into a small meeting room for the foundation. No plaques. No portraits. Just a round table and comfortable chairs. "No one should feel small here," she told Samuel as they arranged the space. He smiled. "You've built more than protection," he said. "You've built trust." Estelle paused, considering that word. Trust had once been her weakness. Now it felt earned, careful, deliberate. That night, she slept with the windows open, listening to waves instead of regret. Letters began arriving, some handwritten, some typed with shaking precision. One read, "I thought losing my house meant losing myself. You proved me wrong." Estelle placed that one in a drawer she labeled reasons. When exhaustion crept in, she opened it and reminded herself why this mattered. At a legal workshop, she spoke plainly. "If love demands your silence, it isn't love," she said. A woman in the back whispered, "Thank you," like a confession. Estelle nodded once, understanding the weight of quiet courage. On the anniversary of Harold's passing, Estelle visited the cemetery alone. She brought no flowers, only time. "I'm all right," she said softly to the stone. "I learned how to stop shrinking." She imagined his smile, the way he once squeezed her hand when words failed him. Back home, she cooked a simple meal and ate it slowly, savoring the ordinary. Peace, she realized, was not loud. It did not arrive with victory speeches. It lived in unremarkable evenings that felt safe. Theo called with good news. His first independent project had succeeded. "I used what you taught me," he said. "I listened first." Estelle laughed gently. "That's usually enough," she replied. After the call, she stood by the sideboard and placed a single framed photo on it, her and Theo at the foundation's opening, both smiling without pretense. The wood gleamed beneath her fingertips, restored not just in surface, but in meaning. At the foundation's first annual gathering, Estelle declined a formal speech. Instead, she walked among the tables, greeting people by name. When pressed, she offered one sentence. "Dignity is not something you age out of," she said. Applause followed, brief and sincere. She accepted it, then let it go. That night, she returned home, removed her coat, and placed the silver hummingbird brooch in a keepsake box. Some tools, she knew, were only meant for certain seasons. Estelle Rowland no longer measured her life by what had been taken. She measured it by what she refused to surrender: her voice, her steadiness, her right to occupy space. She had lost a son to greed and gained a purpose rooted in truth. As the tide rose outside her window, she poured tea and sat at the table she had earned. The chair did not wobble. The house did not feel borrowed. And for the first time in many years, Estelle did not brace herself for the next blow. She simply lived. Thanks for watching. If you value stories of respect, dignity, and justice, please subscribe. It means more than you know, and it lets me keep sharing the lessons life has carved into me.